There is a creature alive today who has survived millions of years of evolution without change, without passion, and without logic. It lives to kill. A mindless, eating machine. It will attack and devour anything. It is as if God created the devil and gave him jaws. Rated PG. Maybe too intense for younger children.
How's it going, everyone? And welcome to the very first episode of the Masterpiece Collection. I'm Steve Cravens, and joining me for the very first episode in this series is Gallego, aka Galleghost.
How's it going, man?
And Jen, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our viewers? First time being on the show. Go ahead.
I'm Jen Kempe, aka JK Meme Queen on Twitter, because that's the one social media I'm still attached to.
Well, Instagram misses you, I'm sure, so get back on that. And today, we've done the underrated series in the past. We've done the all-time gaming series in the past, and we decided to give it a go and talk about a movie that's pretty much universally beloved with good reason, and that is Steven Spielberg's Jaws, which was released in the summer of 1975. It stars Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, Richard Dreyfuss, Lauren Gary, and actually, I think probably the most underrated actor in the movie is Murray Hamilton as the mayor, because he does actually a pretty good job of being a sleazebag without being too over the top about it. But we'll talk about that a little later. Obviously, Jaws is considered to be one of the greatest movies of all time. You talk to anybody and they either love it or they like it. More often than not, kept them out of the water. My mom still refuses to go into the ocean to this very day because of that movie. And it's just one of those movies where I wish more than anything I could have been alive in the summer of 1975 to have gone to go see this, because it's one thing for us to experience it for the first time on TV. And, Andres, we've seen it in reruns in movie theaters, whether it be in Chicago or Los Angeles, wherever the case may be. And, it's great seeing it with a sold out crowd that knows what's going to happen. Even, like 30, 40 years later, you're still getting that high off seeing it with like a rabid fan base. But just imagine seeing it before anybody knew what was going to happen, before anybody knew about that head coming through the hole, before anybody like stuff like that, before, and again, before anybody knew how the shark would eventually perish, how Quint would eventually perish, all this stuff. Because remember, in the book, it's different as well. So that's another aspect of this movie that's really, really incredible, because the book, if you think about it, and I don't know if you guys have thought about this, in the 70s, almost every single major movie that came out from like 1970 to let's say 1975 was based on a book. There was usually one movie that came out that was based on a book that blew away the book.
Yeah.
Clockwork Orange, 1971.
Mm-hmm.
Godfather, 1972. The Exorcist, 1973. 1974, I guess you could make the argument that Godfather Part 2 is that, even because it is pretty much part of the first book, but I'm sure there's other examples we could use. And then Jaws, 1975. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in 1975 too. They're taking these very, iconic books, and maybe it's not fair to call Jaws iconic at the time, but taking them and in many cases elevating them. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I wanted to let's start with you guys here. I feel like everybody who loves Jaws remembers the first time they saw it, where they were, how old they were, who was in the room. So why don't you go ahead and tell our audience, where were you the first time you saw it, and what did you think?
Jen, why don't you take it away first?
It's funny that you say that, because I don't remember the exact first time that I've seen it, because it just was on in my household. Because I absolutely it is my number one film, and it's probably the one I've seen the most times, because there was a solid decade, I think, there where TBS, every weekend, it was on. And I was like, anytime it was on, I'm like, I want to check and see what part we're at, and we're just going to sit and watch the entire thing. But yeah, I don't remember seeing it for the first time. It's just something that's always been in my zeitgeist of my head. We realized as we were getting ready here that I haven't seen it in the theater, which is insanity. I remember last, it's a year ago now. I am from Boston, so I spent a lot of summers on Cape Cod, And that was like the final film that they were showing at the drive-in before they closed up for like quarantine. And I like just missed it by a day. So I was very upset about that. But however, I am from Boston, so I have been to Martha's Vineyard. So I have been to the filming locations that they've done, and I have swum at the beach where the poor little Kittner boy got his ass chewed. But it is hilarious to be there because even though like people may or may not be aware that this is the beach, and even so, like people will only go out maybe like 3 feet into the water. It is not a great place to swim. It's very rocky actually, but it's one of those things I knew, and I was like, this is my favorite film. I definitely need to swim here, even though in the back of your mind there's that primal fear of something lurking in the water. So it's always been something I just absolutely enjoy. And yeah, there's a lot of experiences that I want to have with this film. One of my biggest regrets was the Boston Pops, which is like our orchestra, which John Williams was the composer and the head conductor for a long period of time. He comes back occasionally. A couple years ago, there was a time where they were playing Jaws and with the full orchestra, and he was conducting, and I had a ticket to go, and then I had a work thing and I had to miss it. But I got ET, so I got something eventually. But as soon as I do that again, I will go. So yeah, I will watch this movie for the rest of my life, and I think I will see it in theaters eventually, because that is a hole that needs to be filled.
Oh, yes. I'm going to see that you watch it in 35, because it is astounding to watch it in 35. But also, you touched on this as well too, Steve. I mean, there is something to watching the movie with the audience that knows what's coming, but probably one of my favorite things that in my experience of watching this film was seeing it with somebody who had never seen Jaws before.
I had the same experience actually. Our friend Becky, if you're watching this, and she had never seen it before. So, and I've seen this movie God knows how many times. I mean, it is my favorite movie of all time. I'll just go ahead and confess right now. It is my favorite movie of all time. I've seen it all start to finish. It's got to be close to 100 times. It has to be. It has to be close to 100 times, if not more. And actually, when something's coming, I know what to do. I know how to time it just perfectly. So obviously, when the head comes through the hole, I had
one of the great jump scares of all time. That really is perfect.
Well, especially when it's coming through a theater sound speaker too. Like when you're like right by it too. Like when you time it just perfectly. Like I mean, it's the reaction's the best because like that's the last thing you expect. Yeah. But anyway, I mean, for me, I saw I think it was like 4 or 5, and it was the tail end of it when Quint got devoured. And I remember it was like Easter too. We were going to my aunt's place for Easter, and I saw Quint get devoured, and that was the first time I had seen The Empire Strikes Back, Star Wars, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, the Disney one, and John Huston's Moby Dick. Nice. And in many ways, Moby Dick's ending is a lot more traumatizing than Jaws is in a way. I don't know if you've seen the John Huston Moby Dick where they all the whale just goes apeshit on him. Yep. See that as a little kid, like that to kind of be that like your entry point to death, like and what terrifying death is on the sea. That it was pretty traumatic, but I saw it in its entirety not too long after that because I think it was the Superstation, right? That was like TBS. It was like TBS used to be the Superstation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they had it like a 24-hour marathon for New Year's Eve one year, I remember. And I watched it start to finish.
They managed to put it into like any marathon they're doing. They'll go bend over backwards just to figure it out. 4th of July,
New Year's, Halloween. It's perfect for anything. I mean, it's one of those movies. But at a young age, it's interesting. It's like I didn't fear the movie. I was just so in awe of it because it was so different than anything I'd seen up until that point in my life. And instead of tapping that fear, it tapped a sense of wonder and awe. And like, I mean, I wish I should have brought them out here. I had these toy sharks and these toy whales that I had because of Moby Dick and Jaws. So instead of being terrified of it, I was just like fascinated by these creatures. And I guess it goes either way. Like, depending on when you see it, you either grow up terrified of this movie and what how it preys on a very primal fear inside you of fearing what you don't see, or it triggers your wonder and awe, and I guess that could be the same with alien movies or ghost movies, whatever the case may be for certain people. But for me, that's the way it went, and to this day, it's one of those movies where I think Rich Eisen calls it a remote drop, where if you're flipping through the channels and it's on, you don't look for anything else. It doesn't matter where it is. You just drop the remote and you just start watching. That's what it is for me. Andres, do you have a story, or would you like to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I first discovered this movie, same thing as Jen. It was just on in the house all the time, and TBS, thank you so much. Channel 39, you are amazing in the East Coast.
Dinner and a movie.
Yeah. Oh,
And I miss that.
Oh God. But like it would pop up every now and again. And I just remember just catching it one Sunday afternoon, and it was about the halfway point. And then my dad like literally stopped everything. He was like, okay, we need to watch Jaws. And I'm like, what's this movie about? He's like, it's about guys who hunt a shark. And I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. And at that point, like I started to become a little fascinated by sharks. But oddly enough, this movie didn't necessarily terrify me all that much either. What it did was it kind of made me, for lack of a better word, when I first saw this movie, I wanted to be I wanted to be Richard Dreyfuss in this movie. I mean, like I wanted to be a marine biologist. I wanted to go out and see these creatures out in the ocean and stuff like that. And I remember seeing this movie for the first time sparked almost a 3 or 4 year obsession with it. Like I loved to draw as a kid, and anytime I put pen to paper, I just couldn't draw anything but a shark. Or that iconic scene at the very end where the boat is sinking and it's leaning in and Brody's out there aiming. It's one of the most indelible movie memories I've had as a kid, and one of the more special moments was literally because I grew up over in Connecticut. I told my dad, "Oh my God, I want to go see this out in person in some way, shape, or form if this is real." And then my dad sort of took that, and then the next summer he surprised me and said, all right, we're going on a long road trip. Woke me up at like 4 a.m. We drove all the way out to Martha's Vineyard, and that was a pretty magical experience. Just, I mean, as a 7-year-old kid, that should have terrified me, but I was just in awe and in wonder. I was like, oh my God, this is where Jaws happened. Like, you know, not necessarily this is where the movie was filmed, but this is where, like, it almost felt like I was in Amity, if that makes any sense. So no, this movie has always been tremendously special to me, and it's just amazing to revisit any time.
I mean, you know, it is the masterpiece collection, I guess you could say. And I mean, I was thinking about this before we started filming. I was thinking, okay, the word masterpiece is thrown around a lot. You know, every great director that we talk about, whether it be Spielberg or Kubrick or Scorsese or, you know, Coppola, Cameron, Kurosawa, the list goes on. They usually have a couple movies where we just look at them, no matter how old they are, and they still feel timeless. It doesn't matter how many decades old they are, what like hairstyles or the costumes are, the soundtrack. There's just something about them where, like, when you sit down and watch it, you're completely taken out of your current time, and you're either teleported there or you feel like you're already there. It was a very abstract feeling I had when I tried to describe it. But when it comes to Jaws, something I think is very interesting. It's clearly a movie set in the 70s. You know, 1975. It's in the middle of the 70s, and yet, looking at it, it still feels very contemporary. Like, it's not very dated. Like, I mean, you might see a couple, you know, hairstyles in the background, or maybe like some shirts or something that might look a little out of time. Yeah. Maybe some of the But other than that, like,
a little thinner in the 70s.
Except for that one woman in the beat right before Alex Kittner gets eaten, and she's just floating there like a beached whale. Outside of her, all due respect. It's just one of those movies where it teleports you. It teleports you to Amity Island, and we know Amity Island's not a real place, but like I said, it's Martha's Vineyard. But like, it's such a convincing location that it almost feels like it does exist in a way. Like it's built enough in reality that we believe that Amity Island is a place somewhere in Long Island or up in New England somewhere, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the fact that the scares, that the action sequences, the music, everything like that can still be just as exciting today, regardless of the shark, you know, maybe not being, you know, as impressive as maybe I to be honest with you, there's certain shots in the movie I think where the shark looks more impressive than others.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
And we can talk about that later, because I want to talk about specific shots, how Spielberg was able to kind of camouflage the fact that it was just a rubber shark, and it actually worked. Some don't, but some he was able to, and we'll talk about that later. So let's talk about a little bit about the history of the movie, just a tad, because I think I want to get your opinion on something. Spielberg said that, you know, when he took this on, there was a lot of directors before him that turned it down because they thought it was going to be too difficult to make. They couldn't figure out how you're going to do the shark, and were you going to film it on a tank? You know, how is this going to work? And he had several actors in mind for Brody, for Hooper, and for Quint. Apparently, Roy Scheider was near the top of the list, though, because of his work on The French Connection and the 7-Ups. And Richard Dreyfuss, I guess, was an early candidate for the role that Spielberg wanted, and Richard Dreyfuss actually turned him down and didn't want to do it. And the story goes that he went to go see himself in a movie called The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz, and he thought he was so bad that he was worried he would never get offered another role again. So he called him back up and said, if you still want me for that job, I'll take it. Now, Quint is interesting. Apparently, he offered the part to both Lee Marvin and Sterling Hayden. Lee Marvin, I think, would have been interesting. He actually turned down saying he'd rather go fishing for real. And Sterling Hayden, I think, would have been interesting. I think the issue with Sterling Hayden was that he was a communist and he couldn't. I can't remember what the actual issue was, but like he couldn't, like he was an avowed communist, and for some reason he couldn't get into work in the country, something like that.
Bruce is very patriotic. Will not have that shit on his set. That's what it is.
well, like the U.S. government wouldn't let him on soil, I guess, or something like that. He was like blackballed or something. But this is where I want to start off with, because we can talk about the characters, and I think we're going to agree on this. Roy Scheider is great, obviously the hero of the movie. Richard Dreyfuss is great, like that whole bit they have in the cabin of the ship, like, oh, this is a thresher shark and this is a barracuda. Blah, 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 blah.
What are you wearing? Sweater.
Yeah. See that right there? Yeah, you're wearing a sweater. Yeah.
You don't work much with your hands, do you?
I don't need this working class hero bullshit.
That buddy, all yell up. All right, yeah, I don't need this. I don't need this working class hero crap. But the one actor who is hands down, I think probably the best thing about the movie is Robert Shaw. And I'm so glad that Spielberg didn't get Lee Marvin, that he didn't get Sterling Hayden, because I can't think of another actor who could have done. I mean, think about it. This guy is a playwright, Oscar-nominated actor from Ireland, and that accent that he does, the Nantucket, New England accent that he does. It's one of those all-time great performances, I think, that gets kind of lost in the spectacle of the rest of the movie. Maybe not lost. I don't want to say lost, but I guess that's what I'm asking you guys. With the characters, do they get overshadowed by the rest of the movie in terms of the presence of the shark, in terms of the terror and the thrills and the spectacle of it? Are there performances lost on you when you watch it? Do you just kind of get sucked up into the movie, or do you realize, or do you look at them and say, you know what, actually, believe it or not, I know it's not an actor's piece, but they are pretty damn good. Does that ever cross your mind watching it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. For me, it's the screenplay is also just an example of just a perfect screenplay in terms of utilizing all these different people in the same way, a composer uses a musical instrument, where it's you got the hard ass cop on one end who has a crippling fear of the ocean, which is ironic and great in its own sense. Then you've got the guy who's overly cocky, who's basically just a drunk out there and basically just goes, you know what, I don't need any help. Just pay me and I'll go find the shark for you. And then you got the guy that's right in the middle of that, knows he's way in over his head and knows what's out there waiting for them. And just hearing all three of them in scenes of dialogue just play off of one another, I mean, I hesitate to use this word, but it is symphonic. And just knowing the stakes that are all across the board for this, and just knowing that the movie is structured in such a perfect way with the third act, where you have no choice but to isolate these three and to make them just basically have to deal with one another when you've got a shark ready to bite you. So yeah, honestly, I don't think any performance gets overshadowed. I think every performance rides a fine line, and there's not too much nor too little of any character in that. So I think it's perfect all the way through.
Jen, do you have a favorite character in the movie?
It's very difficult. I completely agree with you guys of what you've been saying, because honestly, on paper, when you're first introduced to Jaws, if you're not aware, you just know that it's a shark and it's the first blockbuster and everything. So you're expecting kind of a monster fest kind of thing. But the reason that I think that it has really stood the test of time is because of Spielberg's just knack for getting this really authentic dialogue And it's the chemistry between the main three that really is the thing that keeps bringing me back for more. Because honestly, it's really hard to pick a favorite. But I do agree that probably it is Robert Shaw that really kind of runs away with it, because he's given two very iconic scenes that most people know all the words to, of both the Indianapolis speech and his very iconic scratch on the chalkboard. Those are moments where the film, everyone just shuts up and lets him have it, and he takes his time with it, and it's just it is a great actor's piece. But the other two, Dreyfuss, is just, I feel like him and Spielberg have a very special connection between this and Close Encounters.
Oh yeah,
he knows that he's very natural, just let him go kind of thing. But Roy Scheider, he is there to be the everyman, and I appreciate that he's along on this ride between the two dynamic of the working class hero, I know everything about the ocean, and no, I really know everything about the ocean because this is what I study for a living. So yeah, it's really interesting to see them all play off each other, and I'll get a little Princess Bride here, but this movie has everything. It's got man versus nature, it's got monsters, it's got comedy, it's got horror, it's got romance, not like the novel, but a better romance in my opinion. So yeah, there's a little bit of everything. There's politics. I absolutely love the politics in this movie. But yeah, it's fantastic. And I think in the beginning, when you're introduced to Jaws, you don't think about the acting side of it, but the more you revisit, the more you appreciate what they all brought to the table. And that's really what has made this an iconic masterpiece.
I think that's actually pretty well said. And the reason why I asked this is because I like to go back and read the reviews from the day. And because it's interesting to see how some critics will label a movie this when it comes out, and then maybe 10, 20 years they label it that. And they look at it with new eyes. I think Roger Ebert famously was kind of lukewarm on the Shawshank Redemption when it first came out. Yeah. And then 10 years later, he was like, I don't know how I missed this, but it's one of the greatest movies I've ever seen in my life, period, end of story. I say this because with Jaws, Gene Siskel gave it a positive review, but he said, and I'm almost quoting verbatim here, he said, where the movie succeeds is in its, incredible ability to prey on its audience fear of the unknown and what you can't see, and of being devoured and all this stuff. And he's like, that's where it succeeds. But it's with the human characters where it falls flat. And I read that, and I was just like, man, I can't believe you're saying that, because it's, just walk away, dude. He's dead anyway, so rest in peace, Gene. But reading that, I was just like, are you kidding me? This is one of those character-driven, very rare character-driven blockbusters. Yes, there's a shark out there. Yes, there's plenty of set pieces in the movie, obviously. But if you don't care about these three guys, and that's the trick also, you can't just care about one of them. You have to care about all three of them. Yeah, all three of them. Because if you don't care about one of them, then the movie just doesn't hold up. You must care about all three of them. You have to fear that one or all of them could die if you haven't read the book. So it's amazing that this is at the time it was only it was the second theatrical film behind Sugarland Express, but Duel got a theatrical release in Europe, so I guess technically it's his third feature. So
we know that.
Nerd talk here, but in his third feature, he's able to. By the way, he didn't have a finished script when they started. It was kind of like the Alien 3 David Fincher thing, where he didn't have a finished script. And Carl Gottlieb and him and John Milius and Howard Sackler, all these guys were kind of writing the script as they went along. They had to go back to research. So think about that, all the madness around you, and yet somehow, some way, you kept the human factor intact. You made sure that at the very least, if the shark doesn't look good, if it doesn't work, the least we can do is have these three characters to kind of, root for, to kind of get out there and kill this thing. And I think that's an impressive feat unto itself, despite all the other crazy shit you had to, go along with. But listen, you mentioned the book. That's another thing and I can't believe we're saying this, but isn't it bizarre how the book is a bestseller? The producers get their hands on it, they read it twice, they think they can make a good movie out of it. The movie is fucking nothing. There's a couple scenes that are similar, like the opening scene, and a couple others that are similar. But then, thank God. I think Spielberg even said, when he read the book, he was like, okay, there's a lot of shit in here that needs to go. This affair between Hooper and Mrs. Brody can go.
Yeah.
The mafia subplot, that can go. The lame way that Quit dies in the book, that's kind of like Moby Dick and Captain Ahab, that can go. The lame way the shark dies, that you read it's just like, holy, thank God he had the balls to be like, okay, I can see like what we're going for here. Like there's potential there, but we're not going to film this book. Like this can't work. Especially for him only be again like his like third movie. It's like, holy shit, you somehow convinced the producers in the studio to be like, oh yeah, you know this number one bestseller that everybody seems to love? Yeah, we're not gonna do that. Yeah. Sorry. No. Like what?
No, absolutely not. And the thing is that was the brilliance of what Spielberg did way back when in the day, is because he did what a lot of directors fail to do, especially in this day and age, is when you take a book, you're supposed to adapt it. You're not supposed to translate it, because film is a completely different medium. I mean, one of my other favorite adaptations that Steven Spielberg has done is Ready Player One. Great book in itself, radically different. I mean, for all the people that are upset about the fact that it's not showing Wade play Pac-Man for 48 straight hours, that is not a movie right there.
I'm just mad they made the Iron Giant a gun.
Oh.
That's bad.
It's so bad. But apart from that, it's just one of those things where Spielberg, like you said, Spielberg knew that he couldn't take certain things straight from the book. You had to adjust it. You had to know that this was a theatrical experience, and so you tailored it to that. Instead of the shark dying in that very anticlimactic way, what do? You shove a freaking air tank in his mouth and you blow it up. Still plausible and still realistic.
They did it on Mythbusters. It worked.
Yeah, it worked.
Thank God for that. Just some more believability. And apparently that resulted in Peter Benchley getting thrown off the set. And I, for those of you who don't know, I mean, if you're watching this, you probably love the movie. But like Peter Benchley has that cameo on the beach where he's the news reporter. But apparently when he found out what Spielberg was going to do for the ending, Peter Benchley said that's ridiculous. That's there's just no way.
That's Hollywood, baby.
Spielberg retorted, he's like, I don't care. It's like, if they followed me like this far for 2 hours, they're going to believe whatever I do for the next 10 minutes.
That's the thing. Like Peter Benchley's book essentially is a great elevator pitch for a movie. Mm-hmm. It's not a great script. It's pitch. Because like his entire, he essentially came up with like the tagline of like, what if a shark got territorial? And then that's all you need to hear. And you're like, that sounds pretty interesting. And you don't want to hear anything else from him. And it's like, let someone else that has a little bit better sense of structure and what people are looking for when they go to the movies to really bring it on home. So.
I don't want to I feel bad because I don't want to crap on the guy too much, because at the end of the day, if he doesn't write,
it's a really good beach read, and I think that's why it actually became a bestseller. Like you're at the beach, you're reading about the beach with the shark.
True.
So it's
and again, without him writing it, we don't have the movie.
Yeah.
But and I want to say something that I'm not sure if either of you read it, but it's one of my favorite horror books. So he started to kind of cannibalize the popularity of Jaws when he wrote a book called Beast, which was it's very similar to Jaws, but it's with the giant squid.
I've heard about this one. Yeah.
It's I'll go ahead and confess it. Like, giant squid is one of my biggest fears because of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I know it's ridiculous, but having grown up here in South Florida, whenever I was out in a boat at night, you look down there, I wasn't worried about the freaking sharks, man. Forget that. Like, I'm worried about a squid coming up and its beak coming through the floor of the thing, and then the tentacles. Right, that is absolutely fucking terrifying.
I mean, I understand that at the Museum of Natural History in New York, they have a diorama of a giant squid fighting a sperm whale, and it's all, it's very dark, and you have to really lean up against the glass to see it, and it terrified me when I was little. So.
I have a picture of it on my phone when I was there 6 years ago. It was absolutely horrifying.
Yeah.
But the irony is that the book Beast is so much better. He wrote it kind of like taking the blueprint from the movie Jaws and then applying it to a book. So he got rid of all the excess bullshit of Jaws, the book, and he said, I'm going to take the formula of the movie and make it as streamlined as possible and make it work for this book. And the book works so much better for it. It literally is just like, okay, there's a giant squid out there, it's eating people, we got to go out there and kill it. And it's very boom, 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 we're going to hit these beats and that's going to be it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, the book's not great. As a matter of fact, I think it's and all the books that went on to go be like famous movies and like all-time great movies. that could very well be my least favorite, which is ironic considering it's my favorite movie. But it's just not a very good book.
Yeah. I think an argument is to be made of this is one of the best adaptations that fixed the problems that the book had.
Oh yeah.
Even though it was popular, clearly better.
But it does. It improves upon it not almost. Every single way.
Yeah.
Every single way. Like, I mean, I think just to keep the train moving here, I think the next one I would say is probably The Godfather, because I enjoyed the book, but there's so much shit in The Godfather. It's just like, we do, like, I mean, the shit in Vegas, the shit with, like, there's so much stuff, the LA stuff. We don't need this crap. Like, yeah. But anyway, I thought it was important to acknowledge the book because, again, like, even though we don't really like the book, somehow, some way, through some cinematic miracle, it ended up becoming this perfect movie. So we've talked about several different aspects of the movie. Let's talk about the score briefly here, because I mean, I think Spielberg himself even said, without John Williams' music, Jaws would have been half as successful. And you know, to basically like be given the task of like, okay, here's this movie about a killer shark, come up with a music score for it. Okay, let me see what I can do, and then just have two notes back and forth and just growing. Again, we talk about how the word masterpiece gets thrown around a lot. The word genius gets thrown around a lot too. And in this case, there were two of them working on the same movie, and that's Spielberg and Williams. I mean, my God, man! And for a guy who's done Star Wars, Indiana Jones, E.T., Jurassic Park, Home Alone, Superman, Harry Potter. I mean, the list is just like. I still think this is his most iconic. And then I know there's some Star Wars fans who probably disagree with me. There's probably Indiana Jones fans who would disagree with me. But if you can take two notes and make that indelible in an audience's mind, you're the fucking GOAT. Like that's it. Think about how many composers like try to overcompensate with as many instruments as they possibly can to try to make something work. And he's just like, no, I don't need that. Just give me a piano. I'll do it for you. Like, holy shit, man! Like, let's appreciate that for a moment.
Yeah, but I find it so ironic. I mean, do you guys know the story of when John Williams played the theme for Steven Spielberg for the first time, sync to the movie?
I know the story, but go ahead and tell the audience in case.
I'll hear this for the first time. There you go.
All right. So basically, John Williams brought Steven Spielberg into the recording booth for a spotting session, essentially. Spotting session is basically when you watch the movie sunk up with the music for the first time. Mm-hmm. And so Williams plays the iconic theme, and then Steven Spielberg stops the movie about 5 minutes in and goes, yeah, that's nice, but what do you really got? like he thought it was like, yeah. And it's just like, oh my goodness, like you sometimes don't know what you have until you put it in front of an audience, and then. Just even talking about how iconic the score is. I mean, like, anytime you go out to the beach, all you just have to do is just go, dun-dun, dun-dun, and then people will just immediately go, all right, I'm not going to go into the water right now.
As a matter of fact, just fun fact, when they were filming War of the Worlds, there's a scene where they were going across on the ferry in War of the Worlds where one of the tripods is under the water, and the ferry gets tipped over, and they filmed that on a tank, I believe, in the Universal backlot. Mm-hmm. When Tom Cruise and Dakota Fanning were in the water, Spielberg actually had the Jaws theme in speakers coming from coming up from the bottom of the. So I thought that was actually kind of fun. But, I know I love that story because it just goes to show you it's like I can only imagine at the time he probably did think it was a joke, but like you said, he's like, I told him to play it again, play it again, and all of a sudden it just clicks like, oh my God, that feels right, like that really does feel right, like. And sometimes the simplest answers are what's that saying? Like the simplest answers are the correct ones or the right ones or whatever it goes. But I mean, it's just And there's a lot of great stories too about like how he was depressed about the movie, and how I think the story goes that when the shark was actually almost finished and they were going to ship it out to Martha's Vineyard, he invited Scorsese, Lucas, and Brian De Palma to come take a look at the shark. And I guess Brian De Palma took a look at it, and he described it to people at Hollywood parties like, you won't believe this. The mouth was going like this, opening up like this, and then it went like this. He's like, you had to see it to believe it. It's like I had a feeling like once we saw like the mouth just get bent so out of shape, I was like, oh man, this is gonna be rough. And apparently Scorsese's head got stuck in the mouth. They played a prank on him. Yep. You hear that, like where his head got stuck and they thought they broke it, so they all like ran the hell out of there. I mean, just like great stories like that. I mean, but anyway, let's move on here. So, I mean, when we're talking about this movie, there are a bunch of set pieces we could talk about. I'm curious, Jen. I'll go ahead and say this. Give us a couple of your favorite scenes. I want to get your favorite scene, but I feel like to say like give me one favorite scene is to do the movie a disservice because there's so many great ones, like big and small. So let me ask you this. Instead of saying like your favorite scene, when you think of the movie, like don't even think about it. I say the word Jaws. What's the first scene that comes to your mind? The first scene in your mental image that comes into your mind when you hear the word Jaws.
For me, it's essentially like the Indianapolis scene is a big one, but for me personally, it's when you have Mrs. Kittner confront Brody on the dock after we've seen the shark that is not the shark and everything, and she has that she nails that line. I don't know if this actress has ever done anything else ever again, but when she comes out and she has the tears in her eyes, and I just heard to let people go swimming anyway. My boy is dead, and the fact that she repeats it like really hammers it home, and it's one of those like I tend to skew now as I'm getting older. I tend to skew more towards the front half of the film. So it's really those human moments that for me, it's all about the effect the shark is having on the town, on the people, on their mindset. That is the thing that I love about the film. So it's between that and one of my absolute favorite scenes ever is like Spielberg has a talent for meals, essentially. Like which the Indianapolis scene is right after a meal. But it's the Brody family meal of you see Roy Scheider just kind of breaking down the weight of the world of his tiny little island on his shoulders. And he has that very nice, sweet little moment with his son. And Spielberg loves the father-son relationship. He clearly has a lot of issues that he's been working through in his movies. But no, that just the whole mimicry of the little boy just looking up to his father, who is his hero, not understanding everything that's going on, and just giving him that one little moment of levity in all of this horror. And he just closes the scene with the give us a kiss. Why? Because I need it. And then like immediately it's like, all right, get out of here. Like that's a very dad thing kind of to do. So I absolutely love that. And it rolls right into Roy Scheider coming in and them just being like absolute friends, even though they just met that afternoon. Mm-hmm. So yeah, like that's one of the great chemistry moments of like, let's go cut this shark open. Like it's great. So yeah, I live for the character dynamics, and that's what really brings it on home for me. So meals. Anytime there's a meal, that's when and that includes when the Kinder Boy gets eaten. So there you go.
Yeah. Jaws has plenty of meals in this movie. But that's, and again, that goes to what we're talking about with characters that Gene Siskel fucking missed, and it's a little. I'm glad you mentioned that it is kind of like an extended. Excuse me. It is kind of an extended scene when they have the shark that's not the shark, the tiger shark.
Yeah.
And it segues into what? Yeah. Which when I've seen it in the movie theater, like people laugh their asses off at that. It's like like one of those perfect deliveries. A what? What? But it is a great extended sequence where she kind of smacks him, and then she kind of like just pours her heart out like you asked.
You get Dreyfuss's reaction like, oh, that was intense. Even though it's like just like a little tap, but it's like, oh God, yeah. So
even the mayor feels bad. Even the mayor just, I'm sorry, Martin.
Yeah, no, she's not. Yeah.
But that father-son moment is great because I feel like if any other director had done that movie, I don't think that scene would have been in there.
No.
And you actually, I know you're kind of like joking that Spielberg kind of like, with his own father-son issues, like he kind of works out these movies. But you're joking, but like it is kind of true, I think, because he did have a distant relationship with his father for years. And I think that he must have injected that scene in there. Obviously, it fits the mood of the character. Because obviously
it feels like a little microcosm of this is something he has experienced. This is like the view of his father. So it is great. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a personal touch. Kind of has them.
Yeah, and it's a personal touch that he brought to the movie. It's a personal moment that he brought to the movie. And again, there's not a single line of dialogue said until he says, "Come here, give me a kiss." It's all done with the goofy facial expressions.
And again, it's that John Williams story because like people remember the notes, which like he should have gotten like credit for being Bruce because that is half the personality is in those two notes. But there's a lot of joyous music in there that's not. the main Bruce game. Like the barrel scene.
Oh yeah,
is like a fun little romp. That's like, let's go on an adventure. Like yeah, it's great.
It's
so like
very whimsical.
Yeah, for that moment, like it's a very sweet little quiet kind of ballad.
Yeah, like a melancholy too, because at the end of the day, a boy is still dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, but like at the same time, like, you know, he has the comfort of his little boy there, and you just know that like the guilt is probably being magnified by the fact that his son is there at being able to have dinner with him, and that
my kids are on that beach too. Yeah.
So, Andres, what about you?
Well, we kind of had this ongoing thing where, you know, we just kind of steal each other's words at certain points. But I have to agree. The Indianapolis scene is freaking amazing. You know, funny thing, you mentioned the post dinner scene over at the Brody house as well too. I mean, it's one of those scenes that doesn't get enough credit.
Yeah.
But also, I truly think what this movie also doesn't get enough credit for is it also rides a very fine line of humor at certain points. Like one of my favorite scenes as well is the scene where Brody comes home after the shark attack and Michael's out on the boat, and then Michael's out on the boat, and then freaking you know, Brody screamed for him to come by, and then his wife's like, no, he's
in a boat.
He's in a boat. It's fine. And then all of a sudden she opens the book and sees the freaking shark. Is like, Michael, you hear your father out of there? And I just love the little look that Roy Scheider gives. He's like, okay, all right, she's on my side now. That's awesome. Yeah. But then also I don't know why this always comes back to me, but the scene where the scene during the second attack on Amity, where it's during the 4th of July, but you know, there's that moment that's played up for laughs where it's the pranksters and, you know, they're out there.
Damn,
and then and then all of a sudden you just find out it's just a couple of kids with scuba gear and stuff like that. He made me do it. He took me into it. And then right afterwards, it's undercut by kind of a horrifying scene when the guy is over in the lagoon, and you know, he's asking the kids if they're totally fine.
Help over there.
Yeah. And then the freaking boat gets toppled over, and what I really love about it is that you just see the slight shadow of the shark coming out to get him. And
I think that is the best use of the animatronic.
Oh yeah,
because it really, like, it's under the water. You're just seeing kind of a silhouette, and you see it go down, and it goes down with him.
Well, it takes his leg down, like it pulls him down by the leg, and that's actually that is the shot that I was getting at when I said earlier that it looks better in certain shots than it does others. And it's brilliant because the waters up there are so murky that you can keep it just below the surface. Yeah. You can see it.
You got about 3 feet.
In its entirety. Yeah. So you see just enough of it with its mouth open coming at you for it to be freaky. And I still think, like, to this day, that's one of those shocking shots where people have never seen it react to it, because to that point, you haven't seen the shark yet. That's the first time you see it, which is all, like, you've seen the fin. And I think even at certain points you see, I think you see
the holiday roast get taken away. So it's like the dock is the shark, but that's it's like, why am I terrified of a piece of wood coming after me? It's like, no, it's what's underneath. So
and you can see it very, very, very briefly when Alex Kittner gets eaten. When he comes out of the water, you can see it a little bit behind him, but that is the first time you see it in its glory.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point. We were talking about this the other day of, like, when it was on TBS back in the day, there was a solid point of time where they were editing this film pretty heavily for television. And they cut out a lot of blood and gore. And, like, now if you watch it nowadays, like, it's on AMC a lot. And it's back, baby. Oh, yeah. So it's you get to see the whole, like, the fins roll and take Alex with them, and you hear the scream. And there is a more extended cut where you see him kind of flopping a little bit, and it's like geyser of blood and shit. And it's very intense, and I'm glad that they didn't use that. But there is a difference from when I was seeing it younger and seeing it now. So I'm glad that they brought it back.
Oh yeah. Well, no, yeah. Traumatized new audience.
Yeah.
To think this movie's PG is just, wow. It's like, I mean, and people say, like, well, you have to keep in mind, the PG-13 rating didn't exist yet. I don't care. The movie as it is should be R-rated. Like, I mean, the shark attacks are freaking brutal. They like, and I think
limbs floating around, like, it's,
and apparently the way they got away with it, David Brown, one of the producers, apparently told the MPA, he's like, okay, why are you giving it R rating? Well, it's incredibly violent, shocking. Like, it's We have to. All right. So with movies like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and, Black Christmas, stuff like that, you gave it an R rating. Why? Well, because it showed a lot of violence and brutality, people killing each other. Okay. You do know that no one is going to go see this movie and then turn into a shark and start eating people. Like that's
the NBA only cares about man-on-man crime. They don't care about nature on man.
Well, that's how
it's the nightly news of like you can show anything on the nightly channel news if it's real.
Well, it's true. I mean, I think that at that point in time, they were showing all kinds of footage from Vietnam.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like Vietnam was coming to a close, 74, 75. Like that was is the end of the war, but you're still getting like all kinds of war footage, from years previous and God knows what kind of street crime in New York, Boston, these urban areas where they show you like real shit that's happening, real horrible stuff that's happening. But a movie with fake shark attacks, I mean that's too much. But at the end of the day, he proved his point. They got the PG rating.
Yeah.
I'll say this. I mean, obviously that's the entire 4th of July scene, in my opinion, is one of the greatest suspense scenes ever.
Yeah.
From the moment you see all the people getting off the boat and Amity Island's getting like swarmed with people, and then the whole scene at the beach is just brilliant because for most of the scene, there's no music. He builds the tension through camera angles, the helicopter going in the air, the camera in the water, the people on the boat. The people, the extra help that they hired to kind of guard the beaches when they're talking on the walkie, hear like the dribble on the walkie with the guns pointed at. He builds tension that way. And then when the shark does come into the pond, that's when the music kicks in. And that is great because it tells the audience the entire time, whenever the shark has either been around or been on screen, the music is there.
Mm-hmm.
And when the shark isn't there, there's no music. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like John Williams is kind of telling you, this is fake. The shark isn't here. My music only shows up when the shark is there. So don't worry about it. If there's no music, the shark isn't there, period. So I kind of love that. But for me, I mean, I'll go ahead and say this. There's two scenes in particular, two moments, I guess I'll say, that really stick out to me. And that's in the middle of the pier scene. Again, John Williams score, but when Roy Scheider's flipping through the shark book and each successive picture starts to get more disturbing. And you start to see great whites, you see lemon sharks, you see the megalodon mouth with the scientists that discovered it and unearthed it all fitting inside the mouth. Then you start seeing the shark attack pictures of people with like chunks of thigh missing and how an arm is missing its tricep and bicep. And the reason why it stands out in my mind is because up to that point, we still haven't seen the shark. Most people knows what a shark looks like. I imagine even back in 1975, even though without the internet and without Shark Week and stuff like that, I imagine most people would know what the hell a shark looks like. We don't know what this shark looks like. Mm-hmm. So by showing all those different pictures of the different sharks, it gets your imagination wondering, what the hell does that shark look like? Because it's kind of like nightmarish images that they show inside the book. And yet again, no dialogue, just John Williams music and then flipping through the book. And that kind of works on your imagination in way. And it's a perfect example of how you don't need to show anything. Like you're showing pictures of the shark, but like you're letting your audience's imagination like kind of brindle with fear of what that shark looks like. As far as the Indianapolis speech goes, yeah, the whole speech is brilliant, obviously. But one particular moment in the speech that's like really like the stuff of nightmares, when he talks about when Robert Shaw was talking about how he bumped into a friend of his who was like a baseball player, and he reached over to wake him up, and the guy toppled over, and he thought he was asleep, and it turned out he had bitten in half below the waist in the middle of the night. And then to like see like Hooper kind of look over at Roy like, holy shit, like utterly terrified.
What do we do?
That in itself is terrifying, to put yourself in that situation, floating in pitch darkness water, surrounded by sharks, where like people around you are getting picked off one by one by one by one. And it could be the guy next to you who's been floating next to you the entire time that got bitten in half by a shark while you were probably sleeping next to him. That is and to think that actually happened. And I know they've made a couple movies on it, like B movies on it. Yeah. That deserves an A movie treatment, because that would like be the stuff of nightmares. That'd be like what Open Water should have been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like to think that actually happened, and it's such like a crazy mission too, that you're delivering the Hiroshima bomb during World War II. Like the shit, like that is like, it's like a movie within a movie almost.
Mm-hmm.
And again, without a single shot of the shark anywhere.
Yeah. And that's really the thing that seals the deal for me of that whole scene is when he goes like he's told this horrific story, and then at the very end it's like, anyway, we delivered the bomb.
Yeah.
And then they roll into singing, and it's fantastic. Like, it's so good.
but when you really think about it, there's a lot of how you're saying, like, there's a lot of really gory or really mature moments in this movie that should be R-rated that is mostly delivered in a lot of dialogue more than anything else. I mean, like, probably one of the biggest ones for me as well is the autopsy of the first victim, where all of a sudden Hooper just shows up and he goes, so this,
because he's the expert.
Yeah.
So for him to be reacting like that, you know it's bad.
Oh yeah, you know it's bad. And then also on top of that, just the little mannerisms that he has. Like, he does not break his line of sight at all. And then he could see Brody smoking. He's like, "Do not smoke right there." It's like, "Can I get water?" Oh. And then you hear his description of the cadaver, and you're like, oh God, how could that have been a boat accident?
It's no boating accident.
But yeah, it's so perfectly played with the dialogue, and then that's also just an example of, you know, if you had gotten another person in that, if you had gotten the wrong person in that role, it would not have worked.
Yeah, he really sells that character of, he's kind of like the voice of reason that doesn't get listened to. So you really get that frustration through him throughout the entire film, honestly. So yeah,
you get
because Brody's the one person that listens to him. And I think that's why they connect so quickly. Because Brody's like, I don't know. You seem to know your shit, so I'm gonna trust you. Yeah. But everyone else is like, who is this guy? So yeah.
And then there's even like the small little moments with Hooper where all of a sudden, like, you know, just when he's at his wit's end, just explaining stuff to people, like when he's explaining to the mayor why they cannot open up the beaches. The end of that scene is just perfectly punctuated with just a moment where he's like,
they're all gonna die.
You know that he wants to say something in there that he's like, you know, he's laughing, and it is kind of funny the way he's laughing.
Yeah.
But I think we've all been there at some point in life where a situation has gotten so frustrating that the only thing we can do is just start laughing because it's just like, what the fuck did you do? I mean, like, seriously, this guy is so freaking blind. He can't, like, I mean, what do you say? I don't think either one of you are familiar with our problems. I'm familiar with the fact that you are going to ignore this particular problem until it swims up and bites you in the ass. This is why he, like, delivers that line. It's just so cool. Like, he's listening to, I think I'm familiar with something. Fuck you.
And even just the way that he reacts to, like, Quint and everything when he keeps telling, like, him to go drive the boat and everything because he's going to blow the engine, and he's just, get out of here. And he's just up there driving on his own, and he's just like, I can't take this abuse much longer. Like, he's like making his own fun because he knows he's fucking losing it. So yeah, it's great.
I mean, there's other great scenes we talk about too, like the fishing scene with the fishing line where, like, and then it just gets taken out. You don't know what the hell it was. Maybe a marlin or a stingray, but it's definitely a game fish. And then you got I mean, obviously, just to mention it, just because I think it's one of the best shot scenes in the movie, for many different reasons, is the shark cage scene.
Yes.
Real
shark.
Real shark. And then also when he, you know, fixing his, you know, his little goggles there, and he looks up, and then you kind of, like, you see the murkiness of the shark coming right towards him, and then John Williams score rising, and then that great shot where the camera just kind of moves around the cage, and genius. We're not going to show the entire shark, but we're going to show you enough just to show you how freaking big this thing is compared to the cage.
And also just how big it is in comparison to the small little tiny morsel that he is. Like, it's just,
you know, I actually, you know what, you brought it up. I'm gonna go ahead and talk about it because I just heard this story from Spielberg himself on an interview he did with Dick Cavett, 1981, when he was promoting Raiders of the Lost Ark, and this is kind of an amazing story. Again, for those of you who know the story already, great. Sorry, but for those of you who don't know, this is actually kind of amazing. Spielberg was getting ready to send. The idea was David Brown, I think it was David Brown actually had the idea. It was like an old Hollywood idea. Why don't we use a real shark, and we'll put a little person inside of a shark cage, and that will make a 10-foot shark look a 20-foot shark. Spielberg was interviewing a bunch of little people on the Universal lot. Apparently one came in that was covered, like, in cuts and blood and whatnot, and he was like, what happened to you? So, well, I'm sorry, it's just I got into a car accident on the way over here and I really need this job. And you know, I didn't want to wait for the ambulance or anything like that. So I wanted to come in here. And so I said, well, you know what, like if this guy's like willing to leave like the scene of an accident and like not get medical attention and like, I'll give him the job based on that.
Clearly he's not going to have a problem getting in a cage.
That's the best part though. They sent him down to Australia. He said like they sent him down to Australia. They had the boat and they had the cage. And he saw how big the sharks were. He went down into the bathroom of the boat and locked himself in. Yeah. And he wouldn't come out. Coincidentally, they had the shark cage, a little bit, the miniature shark cage that he was going to be into. It was dangling off the back of the boat when they were going out, you know, to film in the waters with the great whites. And Ron and Valerie Taylor, who did all the shark footage in Australia, they were on the boat. Valerie went down there and used like a butterfly knife or a butter knife to crack open the lock and said, listen, in 1975, you're getting paid $10,000 to do this. You've been flown down here. You've been given room and board. Like, you can't wuss out now. Like, we need you to do this. Went back up top. The cage that he was supposed to be in got ripped apart by one of the great whites. As they were bringing it out on the, like driving out, it got absolutely destroyed by one of the great whites. And it's one of those things where, and they're like, was that the cage that the little guy was supposed to be in? Like, that was the one he was supposed to, like, that's not, and just, can you, that's the one, sorry, I thought this was safe. But they actually, they used a dummy actually for some of the scenes, because he just, once he saw that, I was like, fuck, forget it, like I can't do this shit. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those great ideas in theory that like would have looked cool, but how fortuitous that a shark happened to get stuck in the cage, and it ends up rather. And according to Valerie Taylor, that wasn't in the script. When they saw the footage, they thought it was so dramatic and so amazing that they're like, well, maybe we can write it where like it kind of takes the cage down with him, or like it gets like we got to figure out some way to use this footage because it's too good not to use. Yeah. So it's one of those. It's just crazy how accident upon accident upon bad thing happened during the making of this movie. And yet it just worked. It's just a true miracle of movie making, because when you go against that much adversity, you either get Jaws or Apocalypse Now, or you get Alien 3. It never. It's not like, oh yeah, well the movie was okay. No. It's either amazing or it's a piece of shit. I know there's people who are probably watching this and be like, fuck you, Alien 3 is awesome. It's not. It's got moments, but like the point is, we'll talk about this later.
We went on a whole diatribe about that once, remember?
We'll talk about this. I'm not doing that again. We'll talk about it. I did it once, I'm not doing it again. That's actually like a line from Jaws 2. You better do something about this one because I don't intend to go through that hell again.
But yeah,
now you got me thrown off. Go ahead.
But here's the thing: is that you bring up a really great point where it's, to a certain extent, all great movies are a lot of happy accidents that all combine to form just a really great experience all the way through. Like Chris McQuarrie, one of the directors of the Mission Impossible franchise. Some of the best ones in the series are the ones that he's directed for me personally. And he said one really great thing where he's like, the one ingredient that you cannot plan for when you're making a movie is chaos. Yep. And you have to allow chaos to come in, and you have to allow chaos to basically change up what the movie is. And you have to allow it to meld whatever happens later on, because if you don't allow it and if you don't become malleable, chaos will envelop you. And that's the thing that happened with Fincher, or like you look at stuff even in today's modern day, like, I know people really defend this movie. I don't get it. Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a freaking train wreck. But anyway, but again, with a lot of these big blockbusters where everything has to be so meticulously planned, we've kind of lost what made Jaws really great way back when, the day where, you had to, you couldn't have all the answers back then. You had to basically go out and see what you got. And it truly is a testament to how much of a masterpiece this movie is. Yeah,
like very much like theater in itself has always been treated as like a living, breathing kind of art. And cinema is different. However, at the same time, you have actors that do have a lot of theater experience behind it. So it is this malleable kind of content that's coming out, and you just gotta have to hope you have the cameras on at the right moment. You gotta be adaptable. You gotta be constantly thinking, what can I get on camera? And then you gotta have a shout out to the editors and the director in the end, because honestly, like, you could have a lot of footage that you think is not great, but little movie magic, and you can make something happen. So.
A movie we'll probably be doing later for the series is Apocalypse Now, and I think what you just said is like a perfect, because it sounds like that's what Coppola was talking about.
Yes.
How, he thought the movie was going to be unwatchable.
Yep.
And like it's just like nonsensical garbage. It's like I'm looking at the footage. I have no idea what the hell I'm shooting anymore. Like, this is going to be a piece of shit disaster. Like you said, if you have no idea what you have until now. I'll say this though, and I think she deserves probably just as much credit as John Williams.
Yep.
And that's Verna Fields, who was the editor of the movie. A legendary editor, who was so revered at her job that they made her an executive at Universal.
Deservedly so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And she won an Oscar for her editing on this, deservedly so.
Mm-hmm.
I do wonder, and I think this was one of the criticisms that Spielberg kind of took to heart was, okay, so you made Jaws, great. You happen to have one of the greatest editors to ever live edit your mess of a movie for you. So is it really the strength of what you shot, or is it the fact that she could take a look at what you shot and be like, I can make this work? And boy, did she make it work. And I love the if you've ever seen the making of Jaws, the Lauren Buzero documentary from '95, they have footage of her editing. And I think Spielberg even said at one time, he's like, I'm sure it was very frustrating for her because when we were shooting on land, we had plenty of footage for her to edit. But when we were at sea, like sometimes we'd go a whole day of shooting, we wouldn't have anything usable.
Yeah.
Like either like stabilizer was off, we'd set up all day for a shot, and then like, a sailboat would go in the background, or like, our actors were thrown up. It's like sometimes we wouldn't get any shots at all, and she wouldn't have anything to do. It really, so that what I'm going to say is this: I do think that Spielberg's genius is on full display in this movie. However, he was very, very, very fortunate to have John Williams and Verna Fields kind of, okay, thanks for what you have. Now look what we're going to do with it. In many ways, it's kind of like
friends in high places.
Yeah.
And in many ways, it's kind of like when we record these videos and we just hand it over to Andres and he does his magic. That's exactly what it's like. I just compared you to Verna Fields, Andres. Bow down. Anyway, but yeah. So, and actually, that's why she didn't edit Close Encounters of the Third Kind for me. It's because he wanted to prove that he could make a great movie without her.
And he did it.
Yeah.
And he did it. And Michael Kahn, who edited the movie for him, actually went on to go edit, I think like 95% of the movies he did after that. And she died in 1982, unfortunately. But it's just, it's lightning in a bottle. It's a perfect storm. It's just one of those seminal movies of the 1970s. And a perfect example of how commerce and art are not mutually exclusive. They can go together. It's rare, because you usually have the blockbusters, and then you have like your freaking pretentious art pieces. But every once in a while, like you can get them to kind of mate, and you get this beautiful.
You can have a whole series of unfortunate events go wrong to make something you never thought would be right.
Oh yeah,
it's amazing. And I mean I could talk about this movie all night, but I know at some point this is gotta end. But I guess you mentioned it earlier, and I know we want to talk about it briefly, and then I guess we can end the video because we talked about pretty much everything. You mentioned that now you gravitate more towards the first half of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the one that you prefer. Now it's going to be my question. It's very much a movie of two halves.
Mm-hmm.
The beach stuff, you got the stuff on the boat. So you gravitate more towards the beach stuff, like the more, I don't want to say the more suspenseful stuff, but the more...
It's the more character-driven kind of things. That's when you get like the whole geopolitics of the whole situation, and commerce is bad and capitalism is killing us and everything. So and you get a more sense of like what the actual effect is of the shark. And that's what's driving these people to go out on the boat and actually do it. And like that's where the rest of the ensemble is. And the ensemble characters are so much fun. So I absolutely love them. I do love the big triad, but all those side characters of that woman in the town meetings and everything. I don't think that's funny at all. And yeah, like they're just fantastic. So they round out the storyline for me. And yeah, as we said before, the mayor. The mayor is one of the best villains of all time. And then you get the humanity too when he has finally like admits like my kids were on that beach too.
Yeah.
Well, but you know what's great about the mayor though, and I know he is. I know the shark is the villain, but he's kind of like the shithead of the movie. But I want to point out that, like, you know, they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. His intentions were not bad. He knows that the town, he's not wrong. The town survives on summer dollars.
Yeah.
We need tourists to come in here and boost our economy in order to survive the winters. So I get where he's coming from. He has to think about not only his job as the mayor, like I want to be reelected and all this other shit. You're thinking about the welfare of the people. Unfortunately, you're also not listening to people who are trying to tell you there are ways to go about having profit while also not putting people's lives in danger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, like, hey, can you at least give us permission to put, like, and he does say, like, you fellas do whatever you have to make those beaches safe, but those beaches are going to be open. Can you at least close down the waters? Like, can we just have people on the sand and not have to worry about the water? Is that possible?
And
so
it's
I just want to say that first.
Like, my family, we have a house on Chatham of Cape Cod, which is now in the past like 10 years, it's Shark Central. And it has like, it's interesting to look at how this movie was treated back then and how it actually has kind of become a thing now.
Mm-hmm.
Of like, but it's the kind of opposite reaction of it's more of an actual attraction than they anticipated. Like people still go to the beach. You might not jump in the water, but you're going to go downtown and you're going to see a bunch of shark merchandise and you're going to get like, I almost got eaten on Cape Cod and stuff like that. So it is fascinating, especially like we were talking earlier, how this is kind of like a timeless kind of story. And it's because there are still like towns, like these are the small town kind of beachside coastal areas that they are the land that time forgot. And there are people that still look like that to this day and still act like that. And they very much do depend on those tourism dollars. So it makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, you're like, at what cost?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Sure. Andres, what about you?
Oh, goodness. I mean, for myself, you know, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, it would always be the Titanic syndrome, where anytime I pulled out the tape, I would pull out just the second tape, and that second tape got rewound so many times. But more often than not, as I've gotten older, I've actually started to lean more towards the first half of the movie, because I think everything that's done in terms of the direction and also in terms of building the suspense and just what Steven Spielberg does not show you becomes far more terrifying than what he does eventually show you. But granted, when he shows you how terrifying that freaking shark is at the very end, it's fantastic. It's one of the best payoffs ever. But yeah, but just, you know, in terms of talking about all those small character moments, or just even the small little like idiosyncrasies between so many other characters, like, you know, even talking about some of the mayor moments as well. I mean, like, it's
those suits are so good.
God, they're so good. And just even the mere fact that we're introduced to them when they're rushing to Brody to basically go like, why are you closing down the beaches?
Yeah.
Or just even the moment where during the 4th of July, why aren't you in the water?
Yeah. The pressure on the townspeople of, you are a citizen of this community, get your ass out there.
Yeah. But yeah, it's, I mean, again, we talked about the dock sequence with the holiday bros. So yeah, it's, I mean, there's just so many really great moments in this movie, and just also just a lot of timeless moments that whenever I think about this, it just comes right back to that first half.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and cop out and say I love both halves.
I'll
say the second half for me, when they're on the boat, I still gravitate towards that, because I think it's great to see the three of them and see, I don't even know if chemistry is the right word, because clearly Hooper and Quint can't stand each other. As a matter of fact, Robert Shaw would antagonize Richard Dreyfuss constantly throughout the shoot. Like, I mean, and he was fucking shit-faced. He would go after Dreyfuss. I wish I was a
method actor. That's all.
Yeah, probably. And well, Richard Dreyfuss said when he was sober, he was a complete gentleman, like just like a real classy, like professional actor. He was fucking, and he's like, unfortunately, he had demons, and like when he was drunk, he was a piece of shit. Like he would go after me, he would rip me to shreds. He's like, and Roy Scheider said one time, he's like, I remember one time we were in between setups on the boat, and he was drunk, and he like looked over at Dreyfuss. He's like, Dreyfuss, you're disgusting. You're a freaking slob. You know, like you're freaking fat, gross. At your age, that's a disgrace. I bet you couldn't do 10 good push-ups. And Drive's like, I can do 10 good push-ups. It's like, well, then show me. If you can give me 10 good push-ups, I will give you $50. Go ahead and do it. And apparently, he's like, and Scheider's like, and I pulled Drive's. I was like, do you know how many people can do 10 good push-ups, like actual good push-ups? You're not one of them. He's leading, and then another time he's like, hey, Drives, I'll tell you. Go to the top of the mast up there. If you go to the top and jump off, I'll give you $100. Like, and he was constantly, he was like challenging him, and like, and then if he wouldn't do it, he would antagonize him and put him down. And even Steven Spielberg said, he's like, God, it was the worst. He's like, because at times I'd like, and I didn't know if he was like doing it to be method, to like kind of like piss him off and get it good for the scene, or if he really just couldn't stand Dreyfuss. Like, I didn't know what the hell it was. It's like I don't doubt it's both. He couldn't stand the guy.
It worked either way.
Yeah. They made movie magic right there. Like, even there's that moment where he bends the can and the cup is like it's nowhere near comparable, but you could just feel the freaking I hate you energy from both of them.
But then that's what really like sells the Indianapolis scene too, where they start comparing the scars and everything. And like after I think the Thresher Shark is the last one they mentioned or whatever, and they both just kind of look at each other, and like Shaw does like this little lean back, like, oh, yeah. And he's like, I'll drink to your leg. Like it was good. Like it's in that moment they finally like realize that they're on a similar page, and then it all goes to shit again. But it's still great.
You want to drink? Drink to your leg. I'll drink to your leg.
Drink to your leg. Yeah. And poor Brody with like, he's like, maybe I can show my appendix scars.
But you're right though. That's actually one of the few moments where like they actually show like kind of like a mutual respect for each other, you know. And also the great thing when they wheel up the shark cage. Jesus H. Christ! He's like, when I was a boy, and every little squirt wanted to be a harpooner or a sword fisherman, like typical like sea dog dialogue. So you go in the water, you go in the cage. Cage goes in the water. You go in the water. Shark's in the water. Our shark. Farewell.
He was way ahead of his time on the sea shanty craze. Yeah.
Oh, good. It just, I mean, God. I tell you what, okay, we got to end this because we can talk about this movie all night. But you know what? I mean, I hope for those of you who have watched this all the way through, I hope we've done a decent job of explaining why we love this movie so much, why it should be considered a masterpiece. I know, listen, talking about Spielberg, you can talk about Jaws, you can talk about Close Encounters, Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., in my opinion, Temple of Doom, Last Crusade, Color Purple, Empire of the Sun, Schindler's List, Jurassic Park, Saving Private Ryan, I mean, Munich, I mean, the list goes on. Minority Report, I mean, Catch Me If You Can. There's so many great movies. A very
wide variety of genres. Like, clearly he is an auteur. Like, he, and it's that human dynamic throughout all of them. They all have very different settings, very different styles, very different topics of conversation, but there's always a conversation of humanity. So
and always a topic of daddy issues.
Very much so.
You know, and just briefly, I want to say, you have no idea how right you are in the sense that I think I told you this actually. I told somebody this recently. Like 3 or 4 days ago, I was watching Munich, and I was like, I think this is the only one where like there's not a mention of a father or anything like that. No, there is. They talk about it, him living in his father's shadow the entire freaking movie.
Yep.
Oh my God, he can't get away from it.
Can't get out of it.
It's such a thing. Like it is a theme in his movie, the absent father, or like the deadbeat father.
Troubled father, yeah. The Close Encounters relationship is.
I didn't realize. Like, oh my God, Close Encounters, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Catch Me If You Can, Christopher Walken's character.
Great.
A Minority Report with his son Sean. Indiana. We're not going to talk about
War of the Worlds, Peanut Butter Scene.
War of the Worlds, it is very much a theme in his work, I guess, and people call him like oh, well, he's just, what do you call him, a blockbuster filmmaker. He's a commercial filmmaker. It's like, but you know what? He puts personal touches in his movies, like, and that is a theme of his that runs through most of his movies. I was gonna say Jurassic Park. He's not their father, but like he becomes a father figure
Hammond
to them.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
So I guess what I was trying to say is that like you can pick out a lot of great movies from Spielberg's filmography. He is a chameleon. I don't think you can look at any Spielberg movie and tell that Spielberg did it. That might be controversial. I don't. It's not like watching a Tim Burton movie or a Martin Scorsese movie or an Oliver Stone movie or Paul Greengrass movie, where when you see it, you know exactly who made it. You don't even have to. You could be just like a casual observer, and you know exactly who made that movie because the visual style is so distinct. It's almost like a brand.
Yeah.
Tim Burton especially. Like there's something about his. Guillermo del Toro is one of them too. You can tell who made it even if you don't know that he made it. I don't think Spielberg's one of those guys because I think his style is fluid between movies.
Yeah.
It's not like he's known for I know they have
this year, like West Side Story, when they announced that, I was like, I don't know if I see that for him. It just didn't feel like it was in his wheelhouse, and I'm very happy to say that I was wrong. So yeah, I feel like when I look at his films, it's not a specific style or vision to it. It's the feeling. There's always some kind of life-affirming message, even in some of the most dire ones of Schindler's List and Munich and even West Side Story, technically. Yeah. But yeah, like there's just, you come away of feeling good about being alive or something.
Yeah. Like you said, it's very life affirming. And then at the end of the day, it just feels like happy comfort food anytime you go see a Spielberg film. So that's the best way.
I would say most times
it feels cheap to call him like a people pleaser, but it's okay to make people feel good.
Yeah. He is very much though a people pleaser with his movies for the most part. Mm-hmm. I think the first time that he even Color Purple, Empire of the Sun, that was kind of him trying to be that director who was more than just the summer blockbuster guy. He was trying to show that his skills could translate to a human story. Like even though movies like E.T., stuff like that, like they do have human. Schindler's List for me is the one where he really. All due respect to Color Purple, all due respect to Empire of the Sun. Schindler's List is like one of those movies where like it is in that pantheon of like, I never would have expected you to make a movie like as great as Jaws is, as great as Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., Jurassic Park. He's made great movies. That is like one of those like godlike movies where it's like, how the fuck did you? Like clearly you're talented. Yeah. I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could take that story and do it justice because quite frankly, like there was nothing in his body of work that said that I hate to say this, but that he had that kind of like cinematic maturity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very mature film. Yeah. There's like nothing you did showed that level of artistry.
And I think the way that it happened is because it's a very personal thing for him. And I think that's what he put a lot of what he's been carrying around into it. Mm-hmm. And like, we've been talking about the father-son thing, like that is something that came from within him. So I think that's why, even though it's so much more dense and on a global scale means more, it still comes across as intimate to a certain extent.
So anyway, that's going to do it for us here at High Voltage Media. It was a pleasure talking to you both about one of the greatest movies ever made. My personal favorite. Jen, is it your personal favorite? You said
it is my personal favorite. My movie taste, like my top 10 constantly changes, but this and my number 2 are the only ones that have stayed for decades now.
What is your second favorite?
My number 2 is Rear Window. Clearly I like Suspense.
Hey, great pick. No, and honestly, there's a lot of Hitchcockian suspense in Jaws for sure.
There is.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, this was a lot of fun. Great first episode for this series. And we will go back to doing the underrated series. As a matter of fact, Andres is still working on a couple episodes as we speak.
So my apocalypse now, man.
White whale.
We'll see those by 2025. But anyway, so that's going to do it for us here at High Voltage Media. I'm Steve Cravens.
I'm Andres Gallego.
And I'm Jen Kempe.
And this has been Steven Spielberg's Jaws. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, and you watched this, I don't know what the hell you're doing. Go out there and watch it. For those of you who've seen it as much as we have, hope you enjoyed the video. We'll catch you next time.
Well, and adieu to your fair Spanish lady. For we've received orders to sail back to Boston. So never more shall we see you again.